Welcome to the Lindsay and Learning channel with content designed to help English teachers just like you find balance in their lives and teaching practice. I am Lindsay, a veteran National Board Certified high school English teacher and founder of Lindsay and Learning. I love to help other English teachers. That's my motivation for writing on my website and creating these videos so that I can share practical feedback strategies, student-centered learning ideas, and mini lessons that you can share with your students. You'll find all that here and more, so don't be a stranger. Be sure to like this video and don't forget to hit subscribe and the bell notification so that you can have a steady stream of English teacher inspiration and ideas. So in this video, I want to talk about an important topic. How can we as educators support students with anxiety in our classrooms? There is a growing consensus that mental health issues are on the rise, and some have even called it a crisis of mental health in schools. Anxiety in my English classes is most often prompted by speaking assignments such as a whole class presentation or discussion. In addition, students might experience anxiety when they're given a high stakes assessment that will significantly impact their grade or their perceived outcome for success. Cough, cough, standardized test, right? The first day of class or even changing to a new seating chart. This can prompt anxiety as students might not know what to expect or be comfortable yet with everybody in the classroom. Outside of the classroom, bullying and harassment, as well as simple things like trying out for a team or joining an extracurricular activity, could trigger anxiety and lead to potential academic impact. In recent years, I've had several students with chronic absenteeism due to anxiety, which ends up creating a snowball effect as they are absent from class, work piles up, and they don't have the self-advocacy skills to communicate with teachers effectively, and this in turn leads to even more anxiety and work avoidance. I had a student in my class last year who would ask to go to the bathroom frequently, and I learned that she sat in the bathroom and had panic attacks because she felt overwhelmed by social situations, the amount of schoolwork she had in general, even how crowded the hallways were. Other girls in this same class appeared to zone out during work time, but actually were experiencing high levels of anxiety. This was not a zone out, but a shutdown. Another past student sometimes skipped class and sat in her car crying, refusing to come back in the building. And this year, I have students in every single class with diagnosed anxiety and 504 plans. These plans can be a useful guide for teachers, but it's important to also educate ourselves so that we don't enable students, nor do we dismiss their needs. For example, did you know that disruptive behaviors, fidgeting, lack of homework completion can all be anxiety related? Though we as teachers might tend to assume that these students have another issue or are just being disrespectful. So let's pause for a moment to lay some groundwork. When a student suffers from anxiety, there are emotional, physical, and behavioral indicators. Emotional symptoms might include a feeling of apprehension of certain situations or a generalized feeling of restlessness and tension. Students might anticipate the worst case scenario and be so self-conscious to the point of it impacting normal interactions. And that's the key. It has to impact normal interactions. Physical symptoms might include pounding heart and shortness of breath, tremors, headache, trouble concentrating, and sleeping. Behavioral symptoms might include avoidance, tantrums in younger kids, or clinginess to trusted supports in building. The difference between an anxiety disorder and people who experience anxiety is the impact on day-to-day functioning and duration of symptoms. I can see how having anxiety might be normal in certain situations that push people out of their comfort zones. However, that is not to say that a normal individual experiences physical and emotional symptoms that interfere with their ability to be around others or participate in certain activities. Furthermore, people with anxiety often suffer from other conditions such as depression, which leads to an even greater impact on daily functioning. People who suffer from anxiety disorders can benefit from a multifaceted approach, including cognitive behavioral therapy, use of stress and relaxation techniques. So we as teachers definitely can't solve the whole problem, but we can put supports in place to help these students. And definitely, I think just understanding is a huge step in the right direction. So let's put some science behind this. Why do students with anxiety experience these symptoms that lead to complete shutdown? Well, the amygdala hijack phenomenon is a fight, flight, or freeze, try saying that 20 times fast, survival mechanism in the brain. When students are in hijack mode, their body shuts down and all the symptoms of anxiety become concurrent. This includes a racing heart, sweaty shaking hands, crying, the inability to do anything, and the impulse to completely remove themselves from the situation. This is because the amygdala interprets whatever the current situation is as threatening, which leads to fear paralysis. So essentially, a hijacked amygdala is a fear-based response, which is a fail-safe in the brain designed to keep a person safe. But in those with anxiety disorders, the amygdala is more sensitive or in overdrive, causing situations that don't seem threatening to others to be perceived as a threat. In the early days of human existence, the amygdala functioned to ensure safety and survival. The threat network was more important than executive functioning skills for survival at that time. However, in modern times, the threats are just different in nature, and this shutdown leads to a loss of skills needed for modern day life, such as critical thinking and the ability to organize information. Some examples of events that can trigger the amygdala in modern times range from the obvious, natural disasters, threat of violence of some sort, to the less obvious, getting bad grades, being embarrassed in front of peers, even existential threats like school shooting or the inability to be successful or live up to parental expectations or get into a good college, and the list goes on and on. It's important to be aware of the connection between anxiety and physical symptoms. This is because students might not realize that their ongoing health issues may actually be caused by anxiety. This makes it even more important to get treatment and learn how to use stress relief and coping strategies. Basically, ongoing anxiety increases cortisol in our bodies, which can cause seemingly unrelated physical symptoms, some of which I listed before: stomach ache, racing heart, dry mouth, cold hands, tight muscles. These can all be traced back to the anxious brain and the chemical response it triggers in our bodies. Physical symptoms that might be caused by anxiety can easily be mistaken for other issues, such as ADHD, learning disability, lack of motivation, or desire to succeed. It's important to look for patterns of behavior while being flexible and responsive to student needs and not jumping to conclusions. Physical symptoms to look for, as stated before, include upset stomach, disruptive behavior, inattention, not turning in homework, headaches, restlessness, perfectionism, school avoidance. Asking the same question over and over can even be anxiety related. Anxiety can also manifest as social anxiety and freezing up when called upon by the teacher. I know that I've been there. Students with anxiety are more likely to frequently visit the nurse's office or to be absent from class. When a student experiences anxiety-related physical symptoms that interfere with the ability to function during class on a regular, ongoing basis, teachers can brainstorm coping strategies and put an action plan in place to counteract ongoing symptoms. Students with anxiety usually respond well, I've found, to teachers who are approachable. My students with anxiety hear me saying things like, "I can see that you're trying. What can I do to help? I want you to take a moment to regroup outside and return to class when you're ready and reset. It's okay to come to me if you're struggling because of anxiety. I am here for you. What strategies can you use right now? How can I support you right now?" When talking to a student about the cause of anxiety symptoms, it's important to reinforce the validity of the student's experiences and to remain open-ended and asking questions. It's important not to name the emotion when questioning, so don't say something like, "Are you worried about the upcoming assessment?" But instead to encourage the student to name the emotion. So instead, say something like, "How are you feeling about the upcoming assessment?" A teacher could also start by saying what he or she is noticing and ask the student how he or she is feeling. It's also important to remain supportive and solutions focused. How can I help you to be successful? How can we work together to make sure that you feel supported during class when you're feeling this way? These are questions that we should be asking. I cannot stress enough the impact that a caring teacher can make. Part of my job includes one section of what we call applied study, which really isn't a study hall. It's an executive functioning support class. And so as a part of that class and working with all of these different students with these different needs, I will often have the privilege of interacting with a variety of teachers. And you can see the response, the physical response in some students' faces, depending on the teacher, because they know whether or not this person is approachable. They know whether or not this person will shut them down. They know whether or not they can go to this person and feel safe with this person communicating their needs. And there are definitely teachers with whom that is not the case for a variety of reasons. So, story time. During my 7th hour prep, I usually go back to my classroom because that's the point of my day which I finally get a break and I get to eat and relax a little bit and reset my brain for my final class. It's usually empty, my main classroom, but on this one particular day, there was a student sitting in there taking a math test. And so I kind of made eye contact and she looked at me and she's like, "Is it okay if I'm in here?" And I was like, "Well, sure, if you don't mind me eating." And she's like, no, not at all. And so 10 minutes passed, 15 minutes passed. All of a sudden, I am eating and I'm like, this is not the sound of my own chewing. I looked at her and she was sitting there silently sobbing, poor girl. And so I went as I often do, and my first stop is to grab the tissue box and just bring it back and place it on their desk, and then kind of get down on their level and say, "Hey, what's going on? I'm here to support you. What can I do to help?" And this wasn't even my student. And just that gesture on my part of being approachable, seeing a need, getting down on her level, making eye contact. She sat there sobbing for the next 5 minutes, and we worked through some stress relief and relaxation techniques to kind of calm her down to the point where she could stop crying and mop away her tears a little bit. And she shared that this was her second attempt taking this pre-calc test from one of the teachers in our school who's rumored to be kind of a hard ass and not very approachable. And she had just sat there thinking, "Oh my goodness, I am shutting down. I don't know what to do. I can't go back to my teacher. He won't understand my situation." And so she just was flooded in her own emotions in that moment. And so I ended up convincing her, because I had to convince her that in this moment it was better to go talk to our in-building support person and kind of get a plan in place for communicating with that teacher rather than staying there and continuing to work herself into a shutdown, because the student had an anxiety disorder and she was just not able to, even with extended time, even with an alternative testing environment, take that test in that moment. So that's how powerful these feelings can be. That's how powerful this shutdown can be. Even if a student wants with all of their might to do what the teacher is asking them to do, they might not be able to do it. And on the same note, making sure that we're approachable as teachers is critical. And so I walked this student to student support and left her there. I went back to my room, finished my lunch, and when the bell rang, this math teacher came into my room and he's like, "Where's so-and-so?" And I said, "Well, this is what happened." And he's like, "Well, why didn't she just come talk to me?" And I found that interesting because his perception of what was approachable and her perception of what was approachable, completely different things. So we might feel like we are being completely approachable, but that might not be what is being communicated to students. It's really important to be aware of that. During class, monitor student affective behavior and check in with the student one-to-one as needed. If this would cause unnecessary attention to the student or disrupt class, a predetermined signal to take a break or use a coping strategy might be useful. I love to use sticky notes on the desk or just make eye contact and then a nod. We can encourage students to use coping strategies such as deep breathing, to music during work time, and use of mindfulness techniques to ground them in the moment. Students might choose to take a step in the hallway to refocus, to go get a drink of water. You can have them run a quick errand for you, just to reset. A time frame for this would be acceptable. For example, I might tell a student, step out of the class for 2 minutes, or take 5 and get a drink of water, come right back. The teacher should make sure then to follow up with a symptomatic student after class to reinforce positive coping strategies and behaviors during class, as well as to encourage the student that they can succeed. If a particular situation causes anxiety-related symptoms, the student and the teacher should talk about acceptable ways for the students to demonstrate the skill. For example, if whole class cold calling causes anxiety, then the teacher could make sure to give students a chance to share ideas with a partner first, or call in a table group rather than an individual student. This is something, by the way, that I do all the time as best practice. I think that it's important to note that there is a fine line when it comes to supporting students with anxiety and enabling them. And I think that that is the fear for us as educators, is we don't want to enable our students. Allowing students to become stuck in a pattern of avoidance actually reinforces anxiety. And students need to learn through experience that they're capable of working through tough emotions and situations that cause their physical symptoms. There should be a protocol in place for keeping absences as short as possible, and it's important to give plenty of positive reinforcement so that the students are encouraged to be persistent and present in the classroom. We need to ask students what they need and give them the resources and space to make their voices heard and advocate for change. Students with mental health issues are their own best advocates, and they are more than capable of taking leadership roles, succeeding as public speakers, and demonstrating real-world skills. They are not weak because of their diagnosis, and probably stronger because of it, honestly, so long as they are not enabled and taught that they are less than. It's so important for educators to think about mental health in schools and classrooms. How can we find ways to creatively support all learners, including anxiety and a host of other mental health needs? As teachers, we need to proactively implement interventions that can work for all learners, such as redirection, checklists, one-to-one conferences, chunking assignments, the use of organizers, etc., as scheduling and support for students who need it. And in addition, I think that teachers should definitely err on the side of kindness. Relationships are important for all students, but especially for students who have anxiety. This rapport can lead to a better outcome. It is important not to make assumptions about students' behavior, to gather information, and to work with support professionals to make sure students are using school-based interventions as well. And that, my friends, is where I'll end for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that this video has furthered and challenged your thinking about anxiety in the classroom. And I'm curious, what resources and supports have been useful for you in supporting student mental health and well-being in your classroom? Let me know by leaving me a comment below. And of course, I can't let you go without reminding you to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more teaching, inspiration, and ideas. I'll see you next time.